Every glass of alcohol carries a history older than civilization. Long before taverns, vineyards, or written recipes, fermentation was already happening inside fallen fruit. The story begins not with humans, but with primates moving through ancient African forests. Ripe fruit dropped, split open, and attracted wild yeast. Sugar slowly became ethanol, producing a smell that pointed toward calories. Biologist Robert Dudley called this the drunken monkey hypothesis. His idea is simple. Our attraction to alcohol may come from ancestors that learned fermented fruit was often easy to find and rich in energy. Those animals knew nothing about chemistry, but a primate able to detect the scent of ethanol might reach valuable food before its competitors. Over millions of years, that advantage could become part of the nervous system. By the time humans appeared, the attraction may already have been there. But finding alcohol in nature is very different from learning how to make it deliberately. Over immense spans of time, individuals better able to tolerate small amounts of ethanol may have gained an advantage. Fallen fruit was easier to reach than fruit high in the canopy, but it was also more likely to be fermented. Alcohol was not yet a beverage. It was part of a survival strategy. One of the oldest clues comes from Raqefet cave, near modern Haifa. Around 13,000 years ago, Natufian hunter-gatherers gathered there, long before farming had fully transformed the region. Archaeologists discovered stone mortars carved into the cave floor. Residues suggested that wild wheat and barley had been soaked, germinated, crushed, and allowed to ferment. That means people may have brewed a grain drink before becoming farmers. They did not grow the grain. They collected it from the landscape and still considered brewing worth the effort. This changes the familiar story. We often imagine humans settling down first, inventing agriculture second, and discovering beer much later. Raqefet suggests the opposite may sometimes have happened. People were already experimenting with fermentation while still hunting, gathering, and moving with the seasons. The drink probably looked nothing like modern beer. It may have been thick, cloudy, weak, and full of grain, but its importance may not have depended on taste. The cave also contained burials. That has led researchers to connect the brewing with funerary feasts, mourning, memory, and ritual. Alcohol may have entered human culture not as an ordinary drink, but as something consumed when communities gathered around death. Fermentation also changed food itself. It released aromas, softened tough ingredients, and could preserve part of their energy for longer. For mobile groups facing uncertain harvests, discovering that wet grain could become a powerful ceremonial food was not a trivial accident. It was knowledge worth remembering and teaching. A shared vessel could change mood, reduce social tension, intensify ceremony, and make separate families feel like one group. That possibility becomes even more provocative at Göbekli Tepe, in southeastern Turkey. Its enormous carved pillars were raised by hunter-gatherers before pottery became common and before permanent farming dominated the region. Moving stones weighing many tons required planning, cooperation, food, and a reason powerful enough to bring scattered groups together. Large stone basins found at the site have been interpreted by some researchers as possible brewing vessels, although the evidence remains debated. If alcohol was produced there, it may have helped transform small bands into temporary crowds capable of feasting, worshipping, negotiating, and building together. This leads to one of archaeology's most fascinating questions. Did agriculture create beer? Or did the desire for reliable beer help encourage agriculture? The idea is known as the beer before bread hypothesis. Grain was valuable not only because it could be eaten, but because it could be transformed. Bread requires grinding, kneading, shaping, and controlled heat. A primitive fermented drink could emerge from soaked grain, time, microbes, and careful observation. That does not mean humans invented farming only to drink. Climate, hunger, population, storage, and social pressure all mattered. But if certain grains were essential for rituals and feasts, people had a reason to protect them, store them, and eventually plant them close to home. A temporary celebration could therefore create permanent consequences. Fields, storage pits, specialists, rules, and leaders. By the 7th millennium BCE, the evidence becomes clearer. At Jiahu in central China, Pottery jars preserve traces of a fermented drink made from rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn fruit. This was not simply food that had spoiled. It was a deliberate blend of ingredients chosen for their sugars, flavors, and ability to ferment. The people who made it understood something practical. Certain mixtures worked better. Certain containers preserved the result. Time changed the drink in predictable ways. They could not see yeast, but they could see bubbles, smell the aroma, taste the difference, and remember which method worked. Fermentation had become a technology. In ancient Egypt, beer was no longer a rare ritual experiment. It had become part of daily life, work, religion, and the economy. Workers received beer as part of their rations. It provided liquid, carbohydrates, and calories to people performing exhausting labor in intense heat. Egyptian beer was often thick and nutritious, closer to fermented food than the clear beverage sold today. It also appeared in temple offerings, funerary rituals, and medical preparations. Herbs and other ingredients could be mixed into beer and given as treatment. One cup could serve as food, payment, medicine, offering, and social bond. By then, alcohol was not sitting outside civilization. It was operating inside it. But the same substance that encouraged celebration could also impair judgment, create dependence, and turn cooperation into conflict. Ancient societies understood at least part of this contradiction. Their stories praised drinking in one moment and warned against excess in the next. That tension helps explain alcohol's survival. It was useful enough to preserve, pleasurable enough to desire, and dangerous enough to control. Across the world, people fermented whatever contained sugar, grain, rice, honey, grapes, dates, berries, agave, and even milk. The ingredients changed, but the process remained simple. Yeast consumed sugar and released ethanol. Humans built ceremonies, economies, and identities around the result. So when did ancient humans begin drinking alcohol? There may be no single beginning. Nature was producing it long before humans could record the moment. Our primate ancestors may have sought fermented fruit millions of years ago. Hunter-gatherers were deliberately brewing grain drinks at least 13,000 years ago. By 9,000 years ago, people were combining ingredients into recognizable recipes. Later civilizations turned alcohol into food, wages, medicine, and ritual. The most surprising possibility is that alcohol did not merely appear after civilization. In some places, it may have helped create the gatherings that made civilization possible. A feast brought families together. A ritual created shared memory. A drink lowered barriers between strangers. Then those gatherings demanded grain, vessels, storage, labor, rules, and leadership. Something temporary could leave behind a permanent society. Every modern drink, therefore, contains two histories: the deliberate craft of human culture and the much older chemistry of fruit fermenting beneath ancient trees. The recipe changed. The containers improved. The process became controlled. But the impulse reaches back beyond writing, agriculture, and cities. Long before humans understood alcohol, alcohol was already shaping behavior. Eventually, we learned to produce it whenever we wanted, and it began shaping history.